My name is Father Eric Ma. I'm a priest from the Archdiocese of Toronto. I'm the pastor of St. Joseph's Worker Parish in Oshawa, and I'm also the priest chaplain of three schools, Ontario Tech, Durham College, and Trent. And I'm very happy to be with you today, specifically to introduce our new podcast entitled Catholic Latte. Now, just to be clear, I didn't pick the name Catholic Latte because I'm a latte connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination. I'm actually lactose intolerant, which is kind of ironic. And the podcast is not really about coffee, so it's kind of misleading. Truth be told, I only picked the name because it sounds cool, it sounds relaxed, and quite honestly, it's one of the few names out there with the word Catholic that wasn't taken. So that's pretty much the story behind that. Now, that said, what's kind of occurred to me in recent days and weeks, especially in the context of prayer, is this idea that sometimes you just got to get out there. Or in the words of Annie Hickman, this really great Catholic motivational speaker, sometimes you just got to start before you're ready. Sometimes you just got to start before you're ready. To use an analogy, I remember back in the day when I was in a seminary studying to be a priest. I mean, obviously they were working on us from all different angles in terms of human formation and spiritual formation. But I think the kind of common unspoken understanding was this idea that, again, eventually you just got to get out there. Eventually you just got to start before you're ready. Because the reality is, there are so many people out there in the world today who are feeling sad and empty and lost and confused because they do not know the Lord, or because they're otherwise hungering and thirsting for the gospel, the real gospel. And so, yeah, you might have all sorts of issues that you're dealing with and have dealt with in the past, but eventually, again, you just got to get out there and then trust and believe. Then God can work through this stuff. God can work through your issues, through your insufficiencies, through your weaknesses, through your insecurities. And more to the point, eventually you got to believe that God actually prefers to work through this stuff, to make it abundantly clear that He's the one who's bringing about the increase. On that note, I really want to take the time now to commend all of my brother priests, and in fact, all the great Catholic men and women out there in the world who are doing their best to spread the good news in these difficult circumstances, using every manner of social media, whether we're talking about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, or whatever the case may be. And really, you're doing a bang-up job. When I think even off the top of my head about how many people are doing Mass online, not to mention all the number of different reflections in all their various forms, it really is commendable. So God bless you for your effort. On a personal note, it's actually kind of funny because obviously I went to school with a lot of these guys who are now priests, who are now doing Masses online through such media as Facebook Live. And the thought of some of these guys doing online Mass even a couple of weeks ago would have been unthinkable. And yet here we are. People are rising to the occasion because circumstances demand it. And more to the point, sometimes you got to start before you're ready. To further illustrate the point, I want to draw upon an example from my own life. And so for those of you who don't know, before I became a priest, I was actually a lawyer working in Toronto. And I remember one day when I was working in Toronto, running into a former coworker of mine with whom I had worked at this summer camp in Vancouver. And so right away, you think about the chances of meeting someone that you had originally met in a different city. I mean, chances are pretty much slim to none. And yet here we were. The difficulty, though, was that I was feeling kind of sad and depressed. And so the interaction didn't go very well. The thing was kind of awkward, and then we just kind of parted ways. But what's funny is that a couple months later, we ran into each other again. But again, funny enough, I was feeling sad, I was feeling depressed. So again, the interaction was awkward, and it ended badly. A couple months later, we run into each other again. And so again, like, what are the chances? Never mind once, never mind 2 times, but like 3 times, run into each other in kind of weird circumstances. And again, I was feeling sad and depressed. I don't know, there was something in the water, something in the air. I'm not sure what was going on there. But I remember thinking to myself, man, you gotta pull it together. Because clearly God wants you to have something to do with this person because He's bringing you in contact with her frequently in a relatively short period of time. So get together, make something happen. And so I asked her out for coffee. Now, before we go any further, I want to make it abundantly clear that it wasn't a date. It wasn't a date because I know that's what you're thinking, all you sickos in cyberspace. But it was not a date. It was just 2 coworkers getting together, catching up on life. But what's interesting is over the course of our little coffee non-date, it occurred to me that it'd be kind of cool if I set her up with one of my friends. So I pitched the idea to her. She thought it was great, and then they went on a date. A little side note, in all my years of priesthood, I have never successfully set up 2 people on a date that lasted beyond the first date. So I have a lot of gifts and talents, but that is not my particular charism, so don't ask me to set you up. Anyways, what happened is my two mutual friends, they went on the state, and they realized pretty quickly they had pretty much nothing in common, except for the fact that they were both Catholic and human. But what's funny is that they stayed in contact. They stayed in contact, and they both had these really massive friendship networks. And so what ended up happening is that whenever these two people would get together, they would often bring their own friends, and then those friends would intermingle, and eventually this became this huge Catholic group of about 20 or 30 people that would meet on a regular basis. And I believe many of them still stay in contact to this day, and a lot of relationships and marriages and families have actually kind of emerged from that particular group. So it's kind of a neat story. But you see, there's a couple of things I want you to notice in the story here. First of all, this idea that I wasn't trying to do anything spectacular. Like, I wasn't trying to form this unofficial lay Catholic movement of 20 or 30 people from which relationships and marriages and families would emerge. My only intention was to ask this friend of mine out for coffee. That was my only intention. But it speaks to the fact that God can use our simple, nothing little efforts to bring about his salvific designs. To frame it in biblical terms, think about that really famous passage in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, the multiplication of the loaves and the fish. The whole idea is that God never calls you to multiply the loaves and the fish. He never calls you to feed the 5,000. What does God call you to do? Give me your 5 loaves and 2 fish. Bring me what you have. I know it's nothing, but then trust I'm going to use your nothing little efforts to bring about something extraordinary. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing I want you to understand, though, about this particular story is that I didn't feel ready. And that's actually a really important part of the story. Again, all 3 times I ran into this person, I was feeling sad, I was feeling depressed. So I didn't feel ready. But the reality is a lot of times we don't feel ready. We don't feel ready to do what we must. We don't feel ready to do God's will. We don't feel ready to love God and neighbor as we should. And yet, these are the circumstances in which we live. And we're called to rise to the occasion, to do what we must, to just get out there and again, start before we're ready. You know, a couple of days ago, I was watching a YouTube video where the actor Chadwick Boseman, who of course plays Black Panther in those Marvel movies, was presenting this Lifetime Achievement Award to Denzel Washington on behalf of the American Film Institute. And after acknowledging that Denzel had paid into this scholarship, which had in turn allowed Chadwick Boseman to attend this summer acting program at Oxford University, Chadwick went on to say something really interesting and profound. So I want to share with you what he said. So basically what he said was, an offering from a sage or an offering from a wise person is worth more than silver and gold because it represents a seed of hope and a bud of faith. And so again, an offering made by a sage or a wise person is worth more than silver and gold because it represents a seed of hope and a bud of faith. Now, obviously, I've watched that clip multiple times, and every time it really speaks to me because it reminds me about something essential about the priestly vocation. Because if you think about it, what actually is the priestly vocation? Generally speaking, it's to facilitate an encounter with God. That's true. But specifically, it's to bring people hope, to strengthen their faith, particularly in moments of difficulty, particularly in moments such as these. And with that in mind, I want to end by reflecting on this quote by Pope Francis, which emerged a few days after this worldwide pandemic started to really come to a head. So basically what the Pope said was this: people will abandon the church when this whole nightmare is over if they feel the church abandoned them during this crisis. Because they will say to themselves, the church was not with me in my time of need. Right? Now, I have to admit, when I heard that, obviously I felt very sad. But at the same time, I felt really convicted in terms of what I was called to do. So I just want to say to you this. I promise to do my part to make sure that you never feel alone, that you never feel abandoned by the church. But obviously that duty and that responsibility can't fall upon one person. So I invite you all to do your part to bring God's loving presence to the world. in your own little way. Don't be intimidated by your circumstances. Don't be intimidated by what you have, what you don't have, what you lack, your own insecurities and whatnot. Start before you're ready. Give God your own variation of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And then sit back and see what the Lord does with your nothing little efforts. May God bless you all.